Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today at SGInnovate. My name is Tuan. I'm from the SGInnovate community building team. This is only our first event this year on aviation and the aerospace industry, so we do see quite a number of new faces in the audience compared to our usual sessions on AI and healthcare or blockchain or medical technology sessions. So I'll just take a quick minute to introduce what it is that we are looking to do here at SGInnovate. We are a government-owned organization, and we invest in and help build deep tech startups in AI, medical technologies, quantum technologies across industries, whether it is in healthcare or mobility or energy and even financial services. So when we, in the journey that we do this for the past 2.5 years, we realized that in order to sustain the entrepreneurial spirit in Singapore, especially in emerging technology fields like what we are talking about, there needs to always be a very strong community of entrepreneurs, investors, corporates, researchers, who all come together, exchange knowledge and information and connect. And this is what we have been doing here on an average of 2 to 3 different events a week. Back to today's session on the future of aviation and digital transformation in the industry. Despite recent uncertainties in the global economy, we realize that there are still blue skies ahead for our industry moving forward. So air traffic projections in ASEAN from Vietnam to Indonesia are still growing fast, and Singapore is well positioned as a global hub in MRO and manufacturing and after-sales service for the sector. So today, we are very honored to have with us Airbus and also Frost & Sullivan on a very nice and exciting and engaging chat on the topic of digital transformation in aviation. Before I invite Anesh and Janesh to join us on stage, we just want to show you, as if any of us here doesn't hear about Airbus yet, but we just want to show you a very quick video clip about Airbus before we start. Could I have the video, please? All right, and now without further ado, I would like to invite Anesh, who heads the digital transformation and IoT team at Airbus, as well as Janesh, who is the consulting director specializing in aerospace at Frost & Sullivan, to take us forward with the event. Let us give them a warm welcome round of applause, please. And before they start, we do have a Slido platform for Q&A. So just go to the Slido website with the takeoff hashtag. You should be able to submit any questions that you may like to send in to the speakers here. Thank you.
Thanks, Tuan, and thanks to SGInnovate for hosting this event. Anis, welcome to Singapore.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Is that mic on? Anis, welcome to Singapore.
Now it is.
Is that mic on? It's a very interesting topic that we are discussing today, and when we are in discussions with airlines, MROs, OEMs, this seems to be a discussion that is dominating boardroom conversations. Aviation as a market, as you know, is taking off big time. Last year, I think there were about 3.8 billion passengers that had flown, and over the next 20 years, that number is supposed to double. The number of aircrafts that are flying right now, around 24,000 aircraft, is again expected to double over the next 20 years. And what is also exciting among all of this is that 40% of most of the deliveries will be happening in this part of the world. So exciting times for Airbus in this part of the world, yeah?
Indeed, actually, although we see Asia and especially also this part of Asia actually as our second home, because most of our customers are actually, the biggest numbers of the customers are in this region. So we're talking about 66 of the customers across Asia Pacific. And if you take a look on the growth rate and on our employment of the rate in this region, they're actually exploding. So we are really happy to be here.
Before I ask more questions to Anas, let me do a quick intro. Anas is the Global VP, Digital Transformation Officer and Head of Internet of Things at Airbus. And this particular change that we see in this particular industry, the number of flyers are increasing, airports are getting congested, there's a lot of need for airports, airlines to accommodate this big volume that is coming up. Digital transformation seems to be the biggest topic that people are discussing. And you are doing that for Airbus. How's that experience coming along that people are discussing?
It's actually the great experience for me because personally I'm just for 2 years with Airbus, so I was 12 years before that in automotive industry, doing the whole digital transformation of automotive, which is now actually a completely different story than what we see in Airbus. And from our perspective, the reason I started with the video was just to give you a kind of broader scope of the company. So most of you guys also probably flew with Airbus aircrafts. Probably not so much if you had the chance also to fly our helicopters. But this is a company with helicopters, with defense and space, so with a lot of military business and with a lot of commercial business. And if you take a look on our numbers, we have a backlog which is around 8,000 aircrafts. So just to give you a perspective of what does 8,000 aircraft also means for us, annually we produce like 800. And when we produce 800 aircrafts, we are kind of pretty lucky and pretty proud of ourselves. So from that perspective, we have a kind of backlog for the next 10 years. And you can say, okay, well, 10 years looks good. Frost & Sullivan would say, okay, good company. I mean, investors also would be happy as well. But what we see today is that the whole world around us is really changing fast. And in our thinking on change, we are starting from our customers. And we see also that customers are coming with different requests. I think the time, we have some good crystal balls from the history, but the time of the crystal ball saying to the customer, in the next 10 years, we will come with this business model, and this is going to be our offering, are gone. Because what we see today is basically the customer is asking also for the solutions which need, coming with the MVP, minimal viable product, and they really want to experience the solution, let's say, in 6 months, in a year. And for this, we see that we have to change ourselves, to question even our core values, and to, challenge the way of how we do the business. And the digital transformation for us, it's not, I'm a German engineer, so geek. Unfortunately, it's not about technology. The change that we are seeing here is, again, about people. So people in terms of our customers, with new mindsets, new demographics also coming into the working place, and expectations, where we have the generation which is, grow up with the smartphones, with the Prime, with the Netflix, expecting this kind of experience even during the flight. And we have to address that. On the other side, what is our core in digital transformation are actually our employees. Because we see that, number of emails, number of, applications coming onto the workplace is just putting too much, stress and pressure on our people. So we have really, from our perspective, in helping them, we are helping us. We are helping us as a company to become also more agile, also more, more ready for the changes also happening around us. Because all this kind of digital, if I may say, use also this buzzword in the beginning, digital technologies like AI, like IoT, like blockchain. I'm a big fan of blockchain, advanced analytics, additive manufacturing. The good story with all these technologies they are quite exponential. And still the storage is cheap and getting cheaper. The processing time is even getting cheaper. The connectivity is not so cheap. So let's work on this to become cheap. But what we see is that small startup, like some of you guys, with some strong competencies, can really disrupt some parts of the industries also where we are today. And we see that happening. And I think we need to be prepared for that. And our employees are really grateful also for this, because in the end we are a really engineering company, as I said, with a kind of aviator DNA. And aviator DNA is actually an optimist DNA. And in the market where we are today, we need to be optimists to change the markets.
Thanks. Thank you so much. It gives me an opportunity to just step back and ask you this question. You have worked in the automotive industry. You have seen other industries evolve around you. Airbus in 50 years, all that stuff that we saw in the video is 50 years. You just celebrated the 50th year anniversary recently. It's a lot of stuff to be done in 50 years. How is digital transformation, or the level of adoption of digital transformation in the aviation industry, if we compare it to automotive or other industries around us? Are we ahead or are we behind?
I think we are right on the spot, if I may say so. Why? If you take a look also from these other industries, you can start maybe with Google and Facebooks and Amazon, also this from this world. These guys are kind of born digital. We have then a kind of hybrid digitals, let's call automotive, highly processing industries, where you have a kind of high level of automation in the production also already. So these guys also need, also to move a little bit also faster. What we see in our industry, we have one premise, which is kind of our birth premise, and this premise is security. Security and the safety of our aircrafts. So, we are having all these lives of the people flying also with us. So before we go into, any kind of, flexibility, agility on that level, although we have to ensure that, the whole organization and the technology is ready also for this. And what we see in many cases is, even if you take the number of the values that I just mentioned, we are not a kind of million, billion sensor vehicle industry. So we are an industry basically using the deep tech, using the technologies which are well tested and well proven in other industries, and applying that also for our domain. And what we see today, I'm in charge for IoT technologies, and I started working on IoT before the IoT name was existing. So in 2005, 2004, it was called machine-to-machine communication. Yeah. So we really have, to take a look also to think, one is the brink also ready also for us, and one is the brick ready for our customers, in terms of, really hardware and physical. On the other side, if you take a look on the services, we think that maybe in the services domains we are late, because the speed and the acceleration velocity that we see there, well, it's I think a different dimension even for our industry.
Primarily from an MRO aftermarket standpoint.
We're talking about MRO aftermarket, but we are talking really about a lot of, I would call it a kind of value-add services along the supply chain, because today in aerospace, when you're talking about aftermarket, basically for all you guys who are not kind of aerospace engineers, we are talking about period when the aircraft is leaving the final assembly line. So everything what happens after that is called MRO. But MRO, definition is changing. Is, for example, the airport operations optimization, is it MRO? Probably today's definition, although not, but in tomorrow's definition, it will definitely be. As
more and more line maintenance becomes more important than heli maintenance.
Yes, and if you take a look, another interesting topic is additive manufacturing, combined although maybe with I'm getting again buzzy. So additive manufacturing combined with IoT and distributed ledger technology, you are actually significantly disrupting the whole maintenance operations in terms of, you know, warehouse logistics, availability of the parts, production of the parts, you know, in our domain, because, you know, at least in Europe and probably also here is even faster. I mean, we are talking about delivery times of, you know, Prime, Amazon, 1 hour, 2 hour, also secure delivery time. So at some point of time, the people will ask, okay, if I can get my vegetables from Amazon in 1 hour, why cannot I get my, you know, part also for my switch or my emergency jacket maybe in 1 hour as well? So this is a kind of, you know, story which drives us, because these expectations will come, and, you know, we need to be prepared for this.
For people who are not from the industry, maybe I can just take a second to explain what MRO is. It's a maintenance, repair, and overhaul of an aircraft. And Singapore is a very important market for MRO, handles almost 25% of the entire maintenance, repair, and overhaul market in APAC. So it's a very important, interesting topic. Lately, OEMs like Airbus have been integrating a lot of sensors onto aircrafts, so that you have a visibility in terms of how they are performing, when they could potentially have a fault, having all this information early. And I know that each flight is now generating gigabytes and gigabytes of data. At what stage are we at? Are we leveraging all this data that is being produced, or are we only using like a small piece of this data?
That's a really good question. I will give you two perspectives, the technical perspective and a kind of market perspective. The technical perspective, if you take a look on our kind of modern aircrafts, A350, A380, we are talking about 24,000 parameters coming also from different sensors also on board, which can be used, theoretically. So we have a lot of sensors there. What we find out is that, you know, let's say 2 years ago, nobody's actually using all the sensors, because everybody is happy to collect the data, but you need really to have a kind of power to deal with the data. If you can connect, as you said, maybe 3 gigabytes per flight or something like that, but if you have to spend 2 weeks analyzing this in order to operationally act on this data, you are not really winning the game, and your business case of investing in this is not really working. So what we see with, you know, with the development for advanced analytics, fast also connections, we see a more and more need to get more of this data also basically also to the back offices, to the AI scientists also to work on them. And this was the reason for us actually to try to, you know, destroy the silos. Because one of the reasons, the inefficiencies that we have in our supply chain, we have really a lot of silos, data silos, with our suppliers, with us, also with MRO and the customers. So the first step that we did in order to kind of democratize the data, if I may say so, was we created Skywise. And the Skywise is actually an open platform, open data platform, where we bring all our data, so basically production data, engineering data, service data, and we provide the chance to our customers to bring their data as well and to exchange the data. So today, 2 years after we did Skywise, we have 80 airlines putting all the data from their all flights into this. And we have more than 10 suppliers right now being onboarded, because what we see is the digital transformation. We don't do it, you know, just because of technology. It's not a dog and pony show for us. We do it with one sole target, which is customer experience and productivity improvement in the industry. And just releasing the data and providing the platform to the people to use the data, we see significant improvements on production. But, you know, it's a tough time if you go to the airline and inform these guys as saying, you know, from tomorrow although you will have your data in a public cloud. So you have to be really prepared and to explain how are you securing the data. Are you, you know, coming from Europe, are you GDPR compliant? And what is happening also with this all data. So this is a kind of business also where we as Airbus also think that the whole safety, security mindset and the data quality mindset can help us a lot, ensuring our customers to share more, and based on this shared basis, create more.
It's good that we are discussing on this data part, because I've been part of some discussions where everybody's excited about the fact that there is so much data, flight data that is available from these aircraft for every single flight. But the question that many players have in the industry is, who owns this data? Is it the OEM that owns the data? Is it the airline that owns this data? Will an MRO have access to the data? And I know that because this is Singapore, that last MRO angle is especially important. What's your view on this? Who owns this data? Who gets to use it?
I think this data discussion you have in every industry. And I think this data discussion is really a kind of specific with the maturity of the digital transformation in the industry. We did this journey also with automotive, so we started this kind of data discussion around 2003, 2005. So how it goes. In the beginning, everybody wants to have data. So everybody's actually investing a lot in getting the data out of the vehicles, of the infrastructure. Well, at some point of time, after this big movement and energizing moment is done, at some point of time your board, your management is starting to ask okay, so what do you do with this all data? Because you have to, you have to get it, you have to store it, you have to manage it, you have to protect it. It's money, so it's a kind of business case investment. And at that point of time, so it's roughly 2 years after you start to collect your data, the people are starting to think, so how about sharing the data? Because maybe there are some, let's say from European, there are maybe some smart guys in Singapore coming from completely different as of business, which can use our data and create a more value based on this data. So what I see is in mature industries, and we are getting this maturity in, and we are trying to push as Skywise and as Airbus in this, it's not anymore about ownership of data from our perspective, it's more about a right to use the data. Yeah. And what do we mean also with this is if we have the joint value proposition with the customer, with the partner, in terms of, for example, our suppliers. If we take, say, the suppliers, we have to exchange the data in order, to involve you in our production process, that you know what is going on in our inventory sites, so that you can improve your processes. This is a different discussion. So from our perspective, it's basically about the joint value proposition, driving that, but the ownership of the data and the protection of the data is something that we are actually not questioning also today.
Sure. So basically, at some point, MROs will also have right to access the data, airlines. Okay. I probably went a little bit on a track with sensorization and IoT and stuff like that. In terms of digital transformation at an overall level, and you started to say that this is not just about technology, it's also about employees and stuff like that. What does digital transformation mean for Airbus?
From our perspective, we see, as I said, the two topics. One topic is actually improvement of the customer experience. And the second topic is empowering of our people. And empowering of our people, let me give you one example. We have 135,000 of the people. A large amount of these people, let's say more than half, are working in the production areas. So basically the people on the shop floors. They are called blue collars. I don't like that. And basically what we're trying to do is, my vision is making basically blue colors to the white colors. So the idea is actually that we are trying to provide information that our people on the shop floors can automatize everything which is boring in routine, and where you would not expect your highly educated guys also to do the routine stuff. One routine stuff could be getting the data from 5 different SAP systems in Excel and doing all the analysis and preparing all the reporting. This is something which is, from our perspective, not value add, and this is something not really why we are hiring the people to work for us. So they are there to make planes, not to make the Excel sheets. And on the other side, the time that we are trying basically to generate time savings, we would like to invest in, to educate our people. And to give you one perspective, I mean, we just decided to, leave the whole Microsoft Office world, and we went to G Suite. So you can imagine also what's happening in your big organization, also when you as an engineer cannot, I'm engineer also, when you cannot make your Visual Basic also programming in your Excel to calculate the formulas. But what we said, okay, we are leaving that world, but we are offering the world of, advanced analytics and machine learning, because let's face it, today you can, learn the TensorFlow usage, so machine learning also modeling also usage in 1 hour mock at your sofa. So we are talking about really enriching and upskilling also these people with the new skills which can help them dealing with the complexity, which was not there when they maybe did they, educations and preparation and professional also trainings also a couple of years ago. Hope that makes sense for you.
Sure, of course. In that context, what kind of technologies then are important for Airbus? And also, you mentioned blockchain. There's a little bit of interest going on in specific areas. What kind of technologies are Airbus betting on for the future?
We started this digital transformation journey also focusing first of all on data. So because we think that getting the data out of the silos, and we have internally and externally a lot of silos, can create a value. So what we did, the first step was getting the data out, and when you have all this data, the first step on this journey was data analytics. So basically providing also the insights also based on this data. Now, at some point of time, we find out that we can even get more value out of the data if we create more data. So going into this kind of, I would call it big data paradigm. So that basically the more data volume also means also better insights. So the IoT also was the next step. So basically getting the data from the sensors, getting the data also from the machines, also getting even the data also from sensors also in the rooms. And then on that stage also we learned, processing of this data needs some new solutions. And that for us also the AI is basically also coming on the scene. The processing, anomaly detections, also predictions, forecasting also based on the data volumes also that we have. And this AI would not be possible or will not be possible if we don't have the right data preparation in terms of data quality, data modeling, in terms of data semantics, so that the analytics also guys can, or AI guys can really work on data. Because what we see today, and this is a kind of cross-industrial challenge, is even if you have some data put into some cloud, if they are not prepared, your highly qualified and highly paid data analysts and AI guys are spending probably 80% of their time cleaning the data. So this is again also not really value add. So the next step was AI, and what we see right now, if you take a look on the whole story of what is important for us is end-to-end data continuity, you need some kind of transparency and traceability. And traceability and transparency is really important in our industry if you think about export control topics. So we see a potential of, I call it distributed ledger, because we are not really in a kind of coin business. We are more in a kind of distributed ledger business where we would like to be capable to track and trace what is happening. So for the future to have this as, helping us learning or understanding what is happening in some specific situation. And all of this, from our perspective, is coming together in a big topic, which is, we call it a digital design and manufacturing system. So the capability that you can simulate and predict behavior of your production system and of your flying system in the future. So basically, another buzzword, digital twins and digital shadows of the reality. So this is a kind of strategic journey and the kind of strategic of the building blocks also that we have without our journey today.
So I could see some specific use cases on AI and aviation and stuff like that. But I want to specifically touch upon this distributed ledger part.
Yeah.
You work in a very complex ecosystem. You are the prime, you have many tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, there's a lot of sub-component suppliers. It's a very large ecosystem. To be able to, and now that you're going in the whole sensorization journey, where every single aircraft is producing more than 24,000 plus data point sensors, generating gigabytes of data, how do you get this whole ecosystem to be part of a distributed ledger kind of a tracking mechanism? There are definite benefits that we hear, transparency, contracts, to be able to know the full visibility of the supply chain. These are areas that people are betting on. But one discussion that I'm constantly part of is that doesn't that require the whole ecosystem to participate? Is Airbus doing something on that front?
I think, as I said, the approach to this new technology that we see is we don't see us as a driving, this technology evolution, because for that our industry is just, too small in terms of numbers. But what we are active as participants in different, movements, hyperledger movement. We are experimenting, having the proof of value projects and a couple of proof of concept on distributed ledger as well. What we see there is, people are speaking for a while about, blockchain in supply chain. And you can see a lot of POCs also running on this. But when you go a little bit deeper into this topic, which we like to do, is you see a lot of topics which are still open in terms of framework, simple topics like data formatting and so on. So the challenge, the kind of blockchain paradigm from our perspective is on one side, you need a broader range because the nodes are basically creating the value also for your network. But on the other side, although with this one, you have a higher complexity in a business model from the beginning. So what we are trying to do, on the end, we have 30,000 suppliers. So if we can, manage, I think that could be a kind of critical base for the distributed ledger. So if we can focus on the simple use cases with this base, also basically just to see how is this working. Because one benefit in our industry is the distributed ledger requires trust. And I think with our supplier and with our supplier ecosystems, we have a quite good basis also for this, either contractual basis or wrong relationships. And simple use cases with a big value from my perspective also can be already addressed there.
One point that I wanted to ask in this entire digital transformation discussion is that many players say there is a lot of data logged on paper. Because of regulations, requirement from ESA, FAA, et cetera, there's still a lot of paper that is required in the industry. Do you see this changing? A lot of people want to go paperless, but there seems to be hurdles, regulatory standpoint, et cetera, et cetera. How do you see this changing in future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So maybe just to explain my view on digital transformation. I think you have a kind of 3 levels. The first level is, I call it digitization. And digitization is actually also got just a kind of digitalizing manual and digitalizing analog. So basically putting the sensor on your tools, putting the sensors on your machines, doing the digitalization of your paperwork. And this part of the digital transformation is expensive part, but you don't see much value in this part. And this is a kind of challenge in many cases. So the second level is something which I call the digitalization. And the digitalization is basically you are getting the full transparency of your process. So you are creating the basis to understand how is your process working. And there is the value. But you cannot go in many cases the second step before the first step. And the third step is digital transformation. And the digital transformation is actually, the core on the end. And it's basically about transforming your process. And the big value is actually first there. So what we see today, a lot of companies are starting bottom up. The journey is quite expensive. The value is quite not there, but it needs to be done. And what we see in terms of the legislations, I mean, we have really good collaboration with the legislators. And these guys are, living in our world as well. Seeing also the reality of dealing with the data, using smartphones as well. So we see there's some really good technologies also to do this part. And for us, drive there is actually simplification of the work for our people and simplification of the work for the legislator as well. So we see a big chances also there.
Thank you. Last couple of questions from my side before we open it up for the floor. First is on data security. So a lot of sensors on aircraft, a lot of sensors in airports, passenger journey being tracked. Singapore is one of those airports where we have a very high level of sensorization and biometric use, and we're going towards facial recognition, et cetera, et cetera. All this data, and then hackers from around the world. Recently, there was an incident. Israel was reporting that there was a little bit of a tampering that was happening from the Russian side on the airports and stuff like that. We seem to be living in a data world. Airbus is leading the charge from an OEM standpoint. How safe is all this data? How is Airbus addressing this issue of data privacy?
Yeah. The really important question, as I said in the beginning, also getting the data into the private cloud could be a kind of big topic. But I will answer that question, but I would add another level of complexity because I'm a kind of IoT guy. So we are not just talking about data, we are talking about devices, which are coming additionally on all of this. In terms of data, we are really driving the whole, we are part of the regulation bodies. We are actively driving the GDPR and all other topics because from our perspective, at the point of where the customer is not believing that the data is secure, all the business models and all the fantasies so that we have on the top will not work anymore. So we work closely with our customers. We work closely also with the startups, because what we see today is many of the businesses are done in the data protection was, not really a kind of focus business in the past. So we have now a lot of money invested in this area, a lot of smart solution, even AI solution going into the protection. You have the topic on, anonymization of data, which is the big topic where we are investing a lot of money and a lot of time. And one challenging point also that we have is, if you just take a look on the data format standardization, what we see today, although the Europe is different than US is different than China is different than Japan. So we are part of broader standardization of the discussion in order to ensure that the data can be really exchanged between all the countries. So because first there, with the right filtering, with the right metadata definition, we can really see the full value. And coming to the next level of complexity, and this is really really near by my heart, is the whole story with millions of devices coming into the place. I mean, if you guys regularly read Frost & Sullivan and others, you will see the scenarios with 25 billion devices also coming into the place 2023, 2025. And we have already a situation in Europe that an airport is having like 300,000 sensors. So if you take a look on these sensors, on these devices, maybe baby webcams at your homes, and all of this, the way how the security is working also today, which is mostly focused on the network security, is not going to help us also manage all of these devices. So we need different approaches also to deal with these devices, and approaches also going also towards really device behavior monitoring, because most of the devices that we have today, they are not hardware encrypted. So they actually are not protected. And most 80% of the people, they're even not changing the code of the sensor or of the webcam that you bought via Amazon. So we see that this is completely disrupting the IT security of the landscape, because it's not pure IT anymore. It's more a kind of combination between OT and IT, combination of behavior analytics with software-defined networks. So this is really a big challenge for not just for airspace. This is a big challenge also for connected cars and all other also really kind of fancy industries today.
There was a recent announcement that Airbus is ready with a pilotless plane, but they're not sure if passengers are ready.
We are engineering company, and when you have a lot of engineers, also you have really to define the challenges. So just to give you one example of our industry, I think we needed kind of 60 years to come from 6 pilots to 2. And now we are on the 2 pilots. Now you can have the big discussion. I mean, you guys, as analysts in the industry, you do that. How secure is the aircraft also with 2 pilots also today, considering autopilot, different of the phases? What we have to face the reality, which is the complexity of the flight, and which is as well a kind of, you mentioned in the beginning, we have unmet needs for the pilots. So even if we want to, train all the guys, at some point of time, although we still have the situation. So the story that we have there is we are prepared for that. But before that, there will be a couple of other also steps, like augmenting, enabling the pilot to do even better also his job, and ensuring actually that the safety, which is a kind of, as I said, the first premise of our business, is still enabled.
Thank you. We are in nice and sunny Singapore. We have a mix of corporate people in the audience. We have some academicians. We have some PhD and some students as part of the group. How is Airbus developing this ecosystem, and how are people participating in this growth of aviation?
Yeah. The ecosystem is on heart of our digital transformation. What is different also this time? So I came from big conglomerate, and now I'm kind of again in a big conglomerate. This time is, from our perspective, it's not about size. And you have really to, create your ecosystem wisely. What we see, and I think we are role model in this. I mentioned Skywise, which is data cloud also for aerospace. We developed Skywise with a startup. Well, these guys are a bigger startup also right now. This is a company called Palantir. But we did this development in 18 months. When we started this journey, our IT guys told us, 12 months also just for the RFP creation, and then we will see how long. So what we see in this is we have to have the right partnership mix, and what we are looking for the partner is agility in a head and the competencies as well to move fast and to move with us. Because closing the loop to your first question, the digital transformation for us is actually working on the concrete pain points in the business and on the customer side. And if you want to work really on the concrete pain points, then you have to be ready to develop the solutions in a kind of iterative way. Because your customer will not go waterfall anymore with this, and we will not wait 2-3 years also to see the solution. Because in 2-3 years, you know, if you have all this dynamics in the technology and market development, it's probably being a kind of old technology anyway. And if you still have, you know, technology lock-in for the next 5 years, well, it could be challenging also for you. So we are really looking for, and we are working today a lot with the startups, with the different phases of the startups. We have a rich organization on our side. So we have basically the city organization with 2 innovation centers, one in Asia, in Shenzhen, in China, one in Silicon Valley in US. We have 5 biz labs. So basically biz lab is our internal incubator sites where we are incubating also the external smart teams of people, startups, and help them, you know, progress, and providing the chances to our internal people to bring the ideas and to evolve. Then we have 12 prototyping houses, and the prototyping houses really are kind of for the geeks. You know, you have advanced manufacturing of the 3D printers, 3D scanners, where really in a fast time period of time, we can really model and rapidly test the product. Last but not least, we have Airbus Ventures, where we're really investing heavily in the startups that we would like to work with. And we learn a lot from the startups. Our people are learning a lot from the startups. So from our perspective, the best way to train, to upskill the people is to let them working with smart, agile startups in the different phases. So as a digital transformation, we are more focused on, let's say, somewhere after A phase, where the startup already has a kind of first pivot, know where to go, and then we help boost that part. But we are, you know, as I said, guys with the aviator DNA, open for the crazy ideas, and we hear a lot these days.
I want to mention a couple of projects as part of some of the ventures and initiatives that you described. In the beginning, I said there are 24,000 planes and it's going to go up to 48,000 over the course of the next 20 years. But if you actually think about it, the number is much higher, isn't it? Because we have flying cars entering the space. Airbus is itself working on some of these platforms. You have electric cars entering the space. Airbus, again, is working on some hybrid to electric, first step hybrid, second step electric aircraft. What's your view on the future? Like, is this market going to just boom to a lot of things flying over our head? Or how do you see this market?
When you have that kind of introduction, yeah, I think this is the great market. So basically, we have a kind of step in between, which is a kind of drones. So we have, you know, a lot of drones already flying ahead about our heads. So the first question, if the object that you are mentioning, a kind of, we call it urban air mobility, is that the car? As an automotive guy, I would say, no, that's not the car. So this is something different. But what we see there is we see a big move for the electrification. Electrification is on our heart because electrification is helping us also reducing CO2. And CO2 reduction, CO2 neutrality is a big topic that we are driving also these days. As a guy who developed electric cars in the past, you know, a couple of topics also needs to fit so that electrification can fly.
Power density.
Power density, you know, batteries, power electronics, and everything else. So if you read a couple of announcements that we did in last weeks, months, we are working heavily on this. Not just the electrification of the flying objects, then the electrification really of the planes. So we have the targets where we want to have a smaller regionals of planes, up to 100 passengers flying electrically. The urban air mobility is a really powerful topic from our perspective, because what we see, we see a big trend, which is urbanization. We see the trend that more people wants to live in urban areas, but they, at the same time, although they want it quiet, Then they wanted non-congested. They wanted clean. So what we did before we jump onto this is we did the projects in South America, project also called WOOM, where we did, let's call it Uber of helicopters. So basically trying to understand what are kind of traffic urban needs beside, you know, Uber and beside, and we see the big needs, especially also in the big cities. There we have two challenges. One challenge is the whole electrification story, which we will manage. The bigger challenge also right now, and we have really the dedicated teams also working on this, is the whole story of traffic management and legislation around this in the urban areas. So we have teams also working this even here in Asia, so in Singapore, in Shenzhen. What we see right now, our benefit for this movement, and this is really an ecosystem movement from our perspective, is really to driving and to bringing you know, all these different legislators, cities, technological providers behind the same blueprint of where we are going together. This is a kind of biggest wall that we have to cross for this.
Amazing, and we look forward to more Airbus platforms taking our goods and passengers in the cities as well, yeah? We have some questions from the audience. I just want to start up with that. First is from Sean from Aximem. Is Sean here? Sean. So the question is, last month Airbus opened up Skywise data platform to global IT service leaders. Are there options or plans also for startups to get involved?
They are already involved. So we have the big startup, which is Palantir, still working on the platform. The first step also that we did is basically we selected all the partners. The announcements also we did 2 weeks ago in Paris Air Show, FTP, Capgemini, Sopra, Accenture. And the SDK way is the way to go. We just have to ensure, as we said, the data security and the stability of the solution. So there is definitely also the way to go for us. And what we do, maybe just as a hint, independently from Skywise, also we see, especially in the IT area, in AI area, a big startup of the movement. So I spend a lot of my time also speaking also with, you know, the new startups, explaining also to me, you know, we have the best algorithm. We don't need quantum computing because we are so smart also to, you know, optimize our decision trees, so on. So what we did with this, we created something that we call AI Gym. So if you guys think that you are kind of the best and smartest in the world, we are providing the data out of the aircrafts, helicopters, even space from our machines. So you can be part of our contest. For example, we just finished a contest of anomaly detection, where we provided data out of the aircraft helicopter data to 300 companies. So I think two-thirds of this were startups, 1/3 are bigger companies. And we said, show us also what is your algorithm capable to do. And you know what? The winners of this competition, and we just announced 2, these are the companies who are even not near airspace, so far away from airspace, and in the regions where we really didn't expect this to happen. So now, after we did this filtering, we will work with them on our use cases with our business. So this is for me a kind of, again, also operation, but you know, filtering on the same time as well.
So anybody can participate anywhere in the world?
Yes.
Okay. So second question is also from Sean. Sean seems to be popular. Are there any plans to open a biz lab in Singapore, or how can Singapore startups join in? I think part of it was answered.
Well, also we have the closest to Singapore right now is Bangalore. It's not so close. We have the best airport in the world. How can you not have an aviation? Yes, I think although what we have is, and what I try to say is, we have so many vehicles to, you know, working with the startups that we just have to see what is the best vehicle. What we see in a biz lab mode, also this is a lot, you know, dealing with the people with the ideas in a really early phase. For us, this region here is maybe requesting for the startups which are even later, because, you know, if we have the rich airline ecosystem, we have the rich maintenance ecosystem, we have the rich airport ecosystem, and we really need here startups which can work with us on the concrete problems and can deliver. So we don't have, you know, too much time for pivoting. We have really we need something which is a little bit more mature, if it makes sense for you. So no plans this year? No plans as of today, but it can change fast. So as I said, we are thinking in quarters.
And there's no opportunity to present virtually to the
That's possible, but what we have today in Singapore is we have some representatives of this organization here as well. We have so-called digital labs or digital plateaus, where we are working as well closely with the startup. So you don't have to be, part of the biz lab to work with us as a startup. This is my message to you, and we will see us after the event so we can discuss. Sure.
The next question is pertaining to your peer in the industry. Recently, they had to go through certain accidents. The question here, again, is from an anonymous person. Is Airbus now more cautious about automation as a result of what has happened with the rival?
Maybe let me just comment on the first part. I think, as I said, the first premise of our industry is actually safety and security. So every safety discussion in the industry and every unclarified safety issue is not good for the industries. So we are really, in our hearts also closely with our colleagues also in the market and hoping also that these problems will be solved anytime soon. What we see is, I think, I'm an optimist as a kind of aviator. I think in every problem there is a chance for the improvement, to rethink of what we have today and how do we ensure security in a digital age. I think, coming from embedded software development, there are new approaches and new ways. How do you ensure, how do you secure software? How do you test your software virtually in the loop or however? So I think these kind of events we should use to reflect on, a question mark of the approaches that we have today. And you can believe me, although we are doing that a lot.
Thank you. The next question is from Niels. In terms of digital transformation and technology, where's Niels? All right. In terms of digital transformation and technology, what do you expect from your partners in the supply chain? In terms of digital transformation and technology, what do you expect from your partners in the supply chain?
That's a good question. As I said, we have 30,000 other partners, and the challenge of this industry, although it's with our partners, we are like in a marriage. Because we have the platforms as a living for 30, 35 years, so we have to ensure that this partnership is really there because we don't have 10 suppliers for a single component. So the partners are really important. What we see today is the discussion with the partners will be the different one. And this will be the discussion from our perspective about the value proposition. You cannot go to the supplier and say, I would like to improve my operation, so please can you provide me all your ERP data and your engineering data, and please I would like to know also in the real time also where is the part in your production. We cannot expect that this will happen. So what we are trying to do, and we have an initiative called Skywise for Suppliers, where we're basically coming with the suppliers and discussing, okay, so what kind of data, what kind of inputs you guys also need from us, in order to make your job also better. Because the challenge that we have is, if you take a look, our most sold aircraft is A320, A320neo, and we have there really output rates which are kind of plus 30 and more %. So if we want really to manage this, we have to take our suppliers really end to end with us, and this is a part of the initiative where we are actually trying to enable the supplier to work with us on this big rate. Because Tier 1 is maybe not an issue, but Tier 4 can be an issue because these guys are producing couple of components also today. Even plus 10, plus 20% in the production on this side could be impacting the existence and competence problem of these people. So definitely, this is a new way to cooperate here.
Okay. The next question is also anonymous. The question is, can you give us examples of how airlines are adopting some of these new technologies and changing their business model?
I think beside the fact that we have already 80 airlines as using also the Skywise for the topics like predictive maintenance, also condition monitoring, also maintenance, also planning, we see a lot of also good developments. Starting also, for example, on the airport side with face recognition, identity also recognition in order to optimize also the flows. We have significant changes, and we will see significant changes in the area of airplane connectivity and the infotainment system on board. We just started 1 year ago the initiative which is called Seamless Airline Alliance. It's basically about bringing also 5G in the aircrafts. And you know, you have to understand this. I mean, 5G terrestrial, so basically on the Earth, is a big challenge. In the aircraft is even more a bigger challenge. But what we see as an industry, especially as Airbus, we have a strong satellite business. So we have projects called space highways, where we can even enable higher communication rate, and enabling also some more a kind of consumer electronics as a solution on board. And the last topic that we see a big revolution in optimization of the operation of the fleets in airlines, because you have the whole combination of the trajectory data, weather data, the data that you in the past even would expect that these data can be used to improve the operation of your fleet. So we see really a lot of going on, both on the sides of our customers, on our side, and on the supplier side.
I wanted to actually ask you this question. How big of a game changer will 5G be over the next 5 to 10 years? Because some countries are a little bit ahead in adopting 5G, where others are kind of catching up.
Yeah. Well, that's another favorite topic that I have. 5G. Yeah. If you take go a little bit deeper into the 5G, and if you're, I was in telecommunication industry before, so basically going from 2G to 3G to 4G, and then now also the 5G. This is a kind of interesting also process technologically, at least from the standards, from the releases also which are needed. I think the industry is ready for a kind of normal also end customer usage. The industry is not ready right now for industrial 5G use cases, like factory of the future, flexible factories. So that this will probably also happen somewhere in 2023, 2024, and after that. The challenges also that we see today is the regulations, which are different in different other countries, and we see it as a big enabler, as a big changer when the technology is there. And we see it somewhere, let's say, after 2025 in the full maturity that can be used also for the use cases that we see today. But we as well also do a lot of test beds also with our customers to see really what is the true value proposition also for the customers also with this.
Sure. So there is one question here that has been voted up by quite a few people, so I have to ask it, and that'll be the last question before I open the floor to people who put their hands up. So this is from Piers, and the question is, what are the customer pain points that you're looking to solve with digital solutions? Where's Piers? All right. What are the customer pain points that you're looking to solve with digital solutions? When you say customer, you're talking about airlines, you're talking about the actual end passenger?
Yeah. This is a good question. So I will maybe put out a couple of them. Yeah. I mean, one topic also that we have, for example, with the low-cost customers is improving the efficiency of the operation of the fleet. Because the challenge that we have, these guys are having more and more routes. Basically, the management of the different other routes in a kind of centralized, real-time approach is the big need also that we see. Because after they buy the aircraft, the operation of the aircraft is a big cost factor in this. The second topic that we see a lot on a customer side is basically providing the transparency and optimization of the fleet usage. Because you're paying a lot also for a good aircraft, but the question is also how can you use additional data to optimize the usage of this aircraft? Do you really want to have two seats or two rows of the seats additionally, or do you would like to offer to cover the longer distance with the same other aircraft based on trajectory conditions and the weather conditions of the routes also that you are using? I think the third other big topic also that we have is transparency, because on that side also we see a lot silos as well. I think the whole data infrastructure on their side is quite segmented, especially towards airports, especially also towards the kind of regulations and regulatory also bodies. And I think the last one is the whole story of customer experience, how to improve the customer experience, how to improve the flying experience in terms of connectivity is one topic, but you know, the overall kind of planning, individualization of the journey. And I'm not talking right now about, you know, VR on board or something like this. It's about how to provide a feeling to the customer that is, you know, for the next 8 hours or 9 hours in the place also where he can, you know, have some enjoyable also time, maybe sleep well, and then leave the aircraft also without the jet lag. I hope it's enough.
So I have many more questions here, but I'm conscious of the time. Maybe can I have a hand up and maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk. So my name is Ranki, and this is very exciting discussions, fantastic. And thanks for coming on board to Singapore and sharing this with us. So I work very closely with your organization, but I've got a broader question for you. There are 2 leading aviation companies in the world, Boeing and Airbus, right? Do you all share your learnings, your experience in terms of technology leading to safety or even other areas, which could be for the improvement of global flying standards or, you know, for the safety of passengers and what have you? Yeah.
Well, I think you have to you have 2 levels also there. One level is everything which is a kind of regulated, so basically the part of the regulation. The exchange is, you know, provided by design. So basically, we have basically the working bodies also in the industry, driven by the regulators, driven by the legislators, which are basically also bringing us also together and ensuring also that you know, the levels are raised. Second level are, you know, the R&D corporations. We don't have, you know, maybe direct cooperations with Boeing, but I think also through the R&D of the projects, we are ensuring that the industry standards in terms, for example, data security, AI, and whatever, are raised into that directions. Because even if you take a look what we are having on, you know, on the global level, also in the aviation, we don't have so big, you know, segmentations and the differences, which is, I think, good for all of us. And the third one, I mean, you know, we are visiting similar conferences, sharing all the similar experiences without going into the detail in terms of, you know, IP-specific topics. So I think the level, this is a smaller industry. You mentioned 2, maybe 3 or 3.5 players or others, but this is, I think, also helping us a lot, especially in these kind of situations where we are today as a global industry.
Well said. Thank you. Firstly, with regard to your responsibility, mandate, and purview, what you can and what you can't in the context of innovation and invention. Number 2, with regard to, you know, your CTO was mentioning about battery, but she didn't mention about the German government initiative intervention. How does you look at it? And thirdly, with regard to AI that, you know, Boeing failed to be, and to your benefit. Now, what you look from that AI problem that Boeing is facing, and what positive steps that you say that you are moving beyond the present quantum? Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Let me start with the third question, because I remember that one best now. So the first one, I'm not sure, and I think also that the industry is not sure if, you know, AI is solution for everything. Yeah. I think we have, first of all, you know, to calm down, to understand also what is the problem as a good engineers, and to see also what is, you know, the root cause. And after that also we can discuss the solutions. I think we should avoid, at least in this phase, you know, putting that in an AI, this or that as a category. I think the colleagues there are pretty good and pretty experienced in this, and we will have a clear communication. This is a kind of industry standard. The second one, Grazia Vendetti and the batteries. I can speak from a kind of automotive also perspective, because we saw some, I would not even call it also interventions. You have the big story, for example, in Germany today. I'm German. The big story in Germany today is basically what is going to happen also with the automotive industry, with you know, whole electrification, and the fact that we don't really have a battery chemistry producers and the competencies also in Europe. So I mean, this kind of discussion you can in Europe and in Germany especially can lead on photovoltaic industry as well. You can lead this discussion on wind industry as well. As a kind of entrepreneur and technology guy, we have to face the reality and to see what is really potential. I think the governmental part is actually ensuring that the boundary conditions are right. Not sure if, especially in this battery case, the subvention could really also solve the problem, because it's much more complicated in terms of battery chemistry and all other topics around this. And the first question, it was the question about concrete innovations that we are driving in our domain, right?
Your mandate and your authorization in your job perspective, what can and what can't, and in the context of innovation and invention.
Yes. Okay.
What is beyond the box that you can unbox and what you can't?
That's a good question. That's a good. So unboxing the boxes. Yeah. What we see, if you take a look on a kind of innovation management in the big company, I think you see a kind of three parts. The one part is the part of Gracia CTO organization. We are talking basically about the topics going 5 years to 15 years, 20 years, also the long-term fundamentals of bricks building also for the next generation. Then we have a kind of short-term topics which are kind for a couple of months, maybe to 1 year, 2 years. And I think the DTO, the digital transformation activities that we have today, are somewhere in between. Somewhere, I asked my guys to think, between 1 and 3 years, not because we cannot, create as well a kind of roadmaps. It's because we see that the market is changing on a higher scale. We are trying to bring all this organization also from a kind of waterfall technology deployment to, I would call it a kind of iterative of the deployment, because these days, from our perspective, it's not possible, to spend 5 years as just working and then to involve the customers. You have to do it in the other way. What we have to be, aware about is in the days of DevOps, agile, lean startup, whatever. I think these are ways of working. What I personally don't see, I don't see a new transistor developed from DevOps. I probably also don't see the new SpaceX also coming out of just an agile team. So you need to have really the kind of fundamental of the competencies in your system. And combine it also with the attitudes of the people. So we are basically trying to drive this.
Can I respond to that? Because when I say that in your mandate, because you know why your title that it is right now, digital is over. We are in the digital world. Yep. Transformation is yesterday. We are in the transvention situation. That era is all yesterday. So how are you going to look at the beyond, the foreseeable, horizon? That is what I'm trying to say. Yep. Because you know why? For example, yep, when I say external out of the box, yep, something that related to IATA and things like that.
I mean, I'm fully with you on one side, which is, it's about change management. And the question is just, okay, is the change this time faster or slower than in the past? I think it's significantly faster. In terms of the unboxing and in terms of, how would I say, big disruption, also big bangs. What we see, I think what we are trying to do is actually to bring the organization, I call it in a kind of 10x mode. Not basically looking just for the next 2%, 3%, 5%, then basically to get the organization, to get our people out of the, I would not call it comfort zone, but just out of the available reality, and to expand this reality a little bit to come to 10x. So if we are if we end up with 5x or 7x, also we will be happy with that. Thank you.
Maybe we can do 2 more questions before we open it up for networking.
Thank you. Hi, I think we've had a lot of maybe consumer-focused discussion in this talk. Do you think, in terms of digital transformation and IoT, if you think about consumer type products and planes versus military versus freight and any of the newer, say self-flying vehicles and so on. Is there any of those areas that is a faster opportunity for transformation and IoT? And conversely, are there any that are going to be slower and harder for you to crack from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. All domains that you mentioned, so basically everything which is dealing with changing the product, as I mentioned also in our industry, so not about retrofitting, but really changing the project, is a kind of long-term story also for us. So it's multi-years where the value also needs to be shown. Everything which is needed to retrofitting and basically providing additional solution of the product in terms of connectivity, data usage, maybe advanced analytics on the edges. This is something also which is in our focus today. But one topic which maybe we missed here today is the whole story of Industry 4.0. So basically the digitalization of the operations, of the manufacturing, of the manual work you mentioned at the beginning. This is the big topic where we see that the ROI periods are much shorter, and the value add for our people is much higher. So we are mostly focusing right now, as I said, 1 to 3 years on this kind of topic. So digital operations, Industry 4.0, and a kind of retrofitting based on data. Because why we're doing this? Many of the programs that we have today and many of the programs which are running today are actually the programs which are developed in the past. So you have, I say always, digitalization on the greenfield is different than the digitalization of the legacy, not just a brownfield. So what we see today, in order to bring this all different systems also in a joint context where you can do a kind of optimization, the data are the key. So the powerful data architecture help us also driving the optimization, developing the value. And by this we are creating, I think, really good experiences for the next step, because the next step will be completely different in terms of the architecture, in terms of mindset, and in terms of the solution that we will see.
One final question from the floor.
Hi, I'm Chang from Air Traffic Management Research. So we have spoken about how efficiency and optimization might be some of the main pain points from customers. So I'm wondering, in terms of air traffic management, how much focus or how much work is being done by Airbus, as well as, how important do you see this space to be?
Thank you for that question. I mentioned although air traffic management is really right now, from our perspective, on the core of any urban air mobility discussion. So this is really also big also from our perspective. And if you're interested, we just published a couple of weeks ago a blueprint of the proposals for the urban air mobility traffic management. So I can share it with you, or you can find it on our homepage. Another challenge that is probably what you are mentioning on is air traffic management as of today. So what we see already also today is there is an issue. There is a big issue, especially also with the whole air traffic management between the airports, but as well as really in a kind of highly kind of saturated also airports. This is important for us from the efficiency perspective as well, and from the safety perspective as well. From the efficiency perspective, because just getting the access to this data and sharing the data with these guys, we think that we can significantly improve our trajectories, efficiency of flying, which is key for our customers, how to reduce the operating also costs. And on the other side, by bringing our data from the aircraft also in the overall kind of aircraft management with much more data, temperature data, sensor data in different other attitudes, we think that by this a lot of other can be changed. And one big topic also that we see there, the amounts of data being generated and the decision also that needs to be met. At some point of time, we are really a kind of, leaving a sphere of the human brain and a capability also to deal with this data. So we see, especially in this domain, also significant, opportunities, maybe a kind of big bangs, although for a kind of AI algorithmic also modeling solutions. Not, and I have to say this, not as exchange for the human. than as a kind of augmenting of the human and support of the human. Because the digital transformation for us, it's actually, as I said in the beginning, more a kind of enabling the people to have a kind of more meaningful life and dealing with the complexity of it. It's just getting higher around that.
With that, we'll close the question and answer. A big round of applause for Anis.
Thank you so much.
Anis is available for another 15 odd minutes to network.
I will be around, and we live in a digital world, so LinkedIn and all other channels that can be used to reach out to me.
Sure. So feel free to come up and find Anis. Anis, very nice talking to you. Thank you so much. Have fun in Singapore.
Thank you so much. Yeah.